everybody.
Turn this up in my headphones, Charles.
Turning it up. Hello, everybody, one and all. Welcome to yet another very exciting episode of the Friends Talking Fantasy podcast. My name is Charles, and with me today, as always, is my lifelong friend and co-host, Dylan.
I'm ready to talk some fantasy with my friend Charles.
I am ready to talk some fantasy with my friend as well, Dylan, and not just any fantasy today, because today we are going to be creating the fantasy ourselves.
Wow.
Total improv right now for all of you listeners out there.
Yeah, we're going to be continuing a segment once called by Charles himself, more coherent than he expected. It basically involves us randomly generating two nouns to become the part of a title of a outline of a fantasy novel that we'll just improvise right here, right now. We'll also try to be inspired by character tropes and roles for both a main antagonist and a main protagonist, or like a villain and hero for our story. And that's pretty much it. Then it's just us trying to come up with an outline, basically the equivalent of a verbal outline of a fantasy novel that includes all of these elements that we randomly generated. And we ask the question of, can we improvise a fantasy novel or story, really?
Outline.
Outline.
So, the last one we dropped, which was Tower of Memories, I think that one went pretty... The Tower of Memories. That one went over pretty well. I am proud to see Friends Creating Fantasy getting a little bit of chatter on social media. And it was one of those things where when we came up with the idea, we were like, this is a great idea. And then we actually sit down to record it and we're like, this could be a potentially horrible idea.
Very nervous.
Yeah. We literally come to these with no preparation. We had created a while back our fantasy book generator that has book title nouns, TM, thank you. It has book title nouns, character roles, and character tropes. And we use those, as Dylan said, to generate the book title, our protagonist, and our antagonist. So this is totally random. We don't know what's going to come up, and I don't think we need to delay any longer. Should we get right into it, Dylan?
Let's get right into it, Charles.
All right,
ready to get that generator pumping?
Ready. So Dylan and I each have the generator going. We're going to pick one name each.
One title.
One
noun
each.
For the title each. Yes.
Correct.
All right. Well, I'm going to generate mine. Beep, boop, beep. I got power, Charles. We've had power before, but I think, the generator has spoken, so it's it's up to you if you want to be flexible about that.
The generator has spoken. I'm happy to keep it in.
Okay.
Because this word that I've chosen is one that we have not used yet, and it is the word spring.
Ooh. Okay. So what springs to mind, if you will, immediately, you could say the power of spring, or which to me has a lot more legs than the other alternative that springs to mind, which is the spring of power,
or like Spring's power with an apostrophe S. Which
spring could be a person, like a character's name.
It could be a character's name.
Yeah.
The power of spring, Spring's power.
I guess we can generate some characters and revisit what title makes the most sense.
Let's see what kind of characters we're dealing with here before we get into the definitive title of this new novel. Shall we go ahead and pick our first character? So I will do that because I have the character types here. And I have chosen, the generator has chosen the word king. A king.
Okay. A
And
priest is which I don't know how these are separate.
a priest?
Oh,
did you pull
Charles.
the wrong column?
I'm always very prepared.
Well, that can be our
antagonist.
Our antagonist will be the
Thanks,
priest
Charles.
because the generator has spoken.
The generator has spoken.
And the idea of an evil priest is kind of interesting, or at least a priest as an antagonist, you know?
I'm ready to do I'm ready to do their roles in the story I'm ready to do the trope types.
Okay,
which
great.
are I'll generate both of those. We've got a king who's our protagonist.
Yes.
And I will generate beep boop beep that this king is the chosen one.
Oh,
that's an easy protag.
Yeah.
All right. And we got to know what our antagonist is going to be like. So beep boop beep. Ooh. This is a softball too. They're vengeful. So we have this is like the tropiest thing ever. Our protagonist is a chosen one king, and then our antagonist is priest makes it strange.
I don't know if this is going to make our jobs easier or harder, Dylan. Sometimes pressure makes diamonds, and when we have to figure out how we fit some of these tropes and character types together, it kind of creates the story for us, but these don't lend themselves to a particular kind of story all that strongly. So I think the pressure is going to be on our backs for this one to carry this through. I'm getting a little more nervous as these nouns and types roll in.
Because it's like, how do we tell a story that has no or does something different when we have a setup that's so standard here? I wish, unfortunately, the generator giveth and the generator taketh away. I wish we had a vengeful king protagonist and a chosen one priest antagonist. That would be very interesting, I think. But the generator has spoken.
Generator has spoken. Yeah. We got to honor what was pulled and when it was pulled. So our protagonist, the chosen one king, and the antagonist is the vengeful priest. So let's get back to this title now. We need to bring it all home by coming up with a title for this book. So we've got the power of spring. We have spring's power. Power in spring could be an interesting one. Those are the best I got.
Okay. Well, I'm between the power of spring and spring's power, Charles. And if you have a preference between those two, it's better to let's pick it and let's roll with it.
Let's stick with the generic book title, The Power of Spring. Keep this as generic as possible, and let's see what we can do with it.
Okay, yeah. Well, we're going to have to find a way to flip this all on its head in the actual telling of the story. Let's try to make Joe Abercrombie proud here and do a little subverting when we get the chance.
So we can try and do this under the influence of Joe Abercrombie.
Yes, what if Joe Abercrombie wrote this story?
Yeah, to kind of spice it up a little bit so we have something to try and do other than just write a classic fantasy story.
Yeah. It's you think about different authors. It's like, if this were in Brandon Sanderson's hands, he'd be able to put some awesome twists on it and these kind of things, and he'd tell an epic story, but he'd be able to play some of this straight, while Abercrombie would probably use these standard setups in a way to really mess with the expectations that we have as fantasy readers, and in a very purposeful and sometimes grimdark way. So let's see if we can do a little subverting here, because we don't have the outlining ability of a Brandon Sanderson. Not that we have the character writing ability or subversion ability of a Joe Abercrombie. But let's get into it.
Let's
Charles.
get into it. Let's go to this vengeful. Let's get to the conflict here, because I see vengeful priest and I'm thinking things like crusade. I'm thinking things like exorcisms, what's something interesting. But then let's ask WWJAD, what would Joe Abercrombie do?
Here's what I think. If Joe Abercrombie had a chosen one, I think the chosen one would be wrong. And what's better, Charles, than a chosen one who, I mean, or really, how does a chosen one who is wrong tie in with a vengeful priest? The vengeful priest is vengeful against this chosen one because they know the actual correct interpretation of the text or whatever document is making the making the person the chosen one. Our king is the chosen one. So the king, rather than rising up to the position of I was just a farm boy. I'm just a shepherd from the Two Rivers. Shout out to real time. Rather than that being the starting point is they've already become the king and they think they're the chosen one. But this vengeful priest, from the perspective of our king, heroic noble protagonist, is being so messed up for challenging their authority as the chosen one. But I think the twist at the end of this novel, Charles, or this story that will probably never actually get written by us, is that the chosen one was wrong all along, and the priest who seemed so vengeful fighting against it was right.
That's well said. I think the success to this chosen one king in an Abercrombie-influenced world is he has to be convinced that he's right and always acting in the noble way and that he's doing the right thing, but it ultimately needs to either be the wrong thing or a thing that's not important at all in the end. I think that's going to be the delicious irony going on here, is he's everything that we expect a traditional shepherd of the Two Rivers to be, right? Where it's I had these humble beginnings and I rose with the blessings of
but
power
that's already
being
happened.
The chosen one. Yeah, that's already happened, and now I'm
by
in
the start
charge.
Of the story.
Yes, and I've done it, and now peace can reign, and I'm going to continue to pursue the prophecy in which I was chosen for. And this priest is does no one see what's happening here? Am I the only one that's this is obviously going the wrong way? And by trying to, with the blessing of knowledge, I guess we could say, he is knows what's really going on, and the king is misguided, I guess I would say.
Yes. So I think the spring of power, Charles, what that means...
Is it the spring of power or the power of spring?
Did we go? The power of spring.
We can change it.
Okay, I want to change it.
Okay.
Because I think that it's the spring of power, and it's just the season of spring is the season that immediately follows the our king having finally risen to power.
Yeah. And spring is often associated with rebirth and good times, and it's getting nice and sunny and everything's good now. So it's to subvert that, also using the theme of weather, subverting what we think of spring thematically.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because immediately I was thinking about the fact that George R. R. Martin's final book is supposed to be called A Dream of Spring,
or Hope of Spring, or something.
It's
like
a dream
that.
Of spring. So
I believe you.
Then I don't know. There's something here, which is kind of the idea that
because winter's coming is this
winter's
thing of
already come,
war is
in ours. Yeah.
But it's okay. Well, what if we start where kind of a Game of Thrones is supposedly going to end, where it's we're hoping for spring, we're dreaming of spring, but it's here now. This is our supposed victory that we are enjoying.
Yeah, and there's a second novel in a Brandon Sanderson series, and there's so many of those that just that'll keep it from being a spoiler when I say there's a second novel that starts with this idea that Sanderson had of no one really tells the story of what happens after you've toppled an evil empire or whatever, and now you have to actually rule. So I think that we're building on that kind of idea.
Right, and Mistborn did that a little bit.
Well, that's why I said a second book in a Brandon's.
Yeah, but we don't have to spoil anything. But Mistborn is the first one is like that too, where you have the whole premise of the book.
Well, the premise of the book is that the Mistborn, the final empire, is in part that the chosen one was wrong.
Yes.
Which I think, yeah, we're getting at some of those elements for sure, and that's not a spoiler. That's how Sanderson speaks about the book.
Yeah,
So,
so we're pulling on some
yes,
Sanderson influence here as
for
well.
sure. Yeah, and maybe I did Sanderson a little dirty by saying he would have played it straight because that's with these tropes because he does subvert expectations too. So anyway, yes, we've got a setup here, Charles. We've got a chosen one king who has already done all the things to finish like the typical adventure that we're used to where they rise to power. Maybe they were even, Charles, to get even tropier. They were even one of these like orphaned farm boy types
Oh
who
yeah, he was a humble orphan who's 6'8", jacked, like super handsome,
red hair,
red hair, of course. This really bright blue eyes that everyone can see from far away.
Well, they're so striking. They're just
striking.
So striking, those eyes, Charles.
And like all these different women are pining over him and all these other things. He's the most virtuistic, but he's so noble, Dylan, and so humble at the same time. He did not choose this. It was thrust upon him and he answered the call.
Oh, yes.
Like,
reluctant.
He was all of these humble, and he is a fair ruler who wants to give more power to everybody, and he's just so noble in his cause.
And
like
that's
you go
going to go hardly
you have to go all
in
him. On the tropes.
Right?
You have to go shove all the
start.
tropes in there. Yes.
So then we can destroy all of that.
So we can be like, you were so wound up in doing the right thing that you didn't realize your cause was wrong the whole time, essentially.
Yes. And now you've got into this point where you have a spring of power, a spring after the winter in which you get the chance to actually rule. And the only thorn in our redheaded 6'8" striking blue-eyed hero's side, I guess, right? Like I said, thorn. The thorn in his side is this vengeful priest. So what's going on? The priest, I think we got to know more about what's going on with the priest.
So I think the priest is also like a mustache twirling, like in the shadows, stuck to his tower. Seems that way. No one really likes him that much because they don't understand him that much because he's kind of eccentric. That's how I see this priest going. And if he is going to be vengeful, then he does have to honestly be almost kind of not necessarily jealous or coveting of the king's position, but he does have to admittedly be annoyed by it in some way. Otherwise, he wouldn't be vengeful, right?
Yeah, I hear that.
So he can't just be also nobly trying to pursue his own cause. He has to also just not like this guy at all.
So I think here's something that's always bugged me sometimes in fantasy stories. I think that we get these moments where it's like our protag, who's this like big hero person that we're all supposed to love, sometimes like goes about basically like killing lots of henchmen or hench people and stuff. Like we get these moments where they're doing some pretty messed up things for this greater good purpose to defeat the Dark Lord. And sometimes we even get this moment, Charles, after they've killed all these hench people, where then our chosen one hero then is like, no, I choose forgiveness with the actual like horrible person behind all of this.
Right.
And like that just always bugged me a lot. Because I'm like, what about those hench people? And I think that what if the priest is vengeful because of one of these moments that the chosen one on their path to becoming the king kind of had to kill someone in their family or relate to whatever, like a friend, a lover, whatever, that the priest is pissed about it. It's like, no, you're in your own deluded chosen one head about what you want to like accomplish here to become king, and you killed someone really close to me in a way that was messed up.
I like that idea. I think that could be a fun reveal a little bit later on in the beginning where you realize like you're bought in that the king is virtuistic and the chosen one and all the tropes. But then there's some sort of flashback or recollection or discussion that reveals that he did some sort of what you could compare to an atrocity, but maybe on a more personal level where he kills one person that had a personal relationship with the priest or was super innocent or something like that in the pursuit of doing the right thing, right? And that can be an interesting reveal and some insight into the king's character of like, hey, he wasn't as perfect as we thought because he did do some of these pretty horrible things. And I like that. And I think fleshing out what that relationship is between all those people is a super interesting one. Something that I had an idea and I wanted to bounce off of you was we have a vengeful priest, right? Like this king has already won and is at the height of his prosper, like his PR couldn't be any better at this point. So why would the priest be so determined to and vengeful? And part of me was like, he is a priest. What if he had a bona fide vision from God that basically told him this world is going down the wrong path, and because you're the only priest or whatever, because you're the one that can do it, and maybe it's his relationship with the king or the victim of the king or something. It's like, I am blessing you with this vision of the future, and only you know how to prevent this horrible future and have actually any hope of survival, something like that, like a divine intervention moment. I think would be kind of cool.
Yes, and I think that I like this idea that the priest, they've had some sort of moment of being,
could be a prophecy,
like,
dare
actually,
I say.
Yes, an actual prophecy that is like, this one's true. Like the chosen one is wrong. Like just got in our chosen one king's head somehow,
or that he was misunderstood or something.
Or misunderstood.
I think it's important that the king needs to be as virtuistic as possible. There can't be any shady things to his character. It's his,
I agree. Yeah,
he's in the wrong. He's going down the wrong lane, but
yes,
he's doing it as nobly as possible, which is what's annoying about him. It's what makes it so difficult.
Right. Well, I agree. When I say he's wrong, I don't mean he's acting deliberately in a way of like misinterpreting it. I think it's like our priest actually has the religious background here, where they can interpret the text in a way that is like more accurate than is the way that whoever guided the chosen one down their path. What if the chosen one was like selected and interpreted by a more typical like wizard or like Aes Sedai type for the Wheel of Time fans out there. So, and we need more gender diversity here. Like, I guess I kind of interpreted like king is not gender neutral, and like priest definitely evokes a sense that it's probably a man, though it could be gender neutral. So I'd love a wizard. I'd love a wizard. What I would be, we could gender flip the priest for sure. And we could also get a like Aes Sedai type like woman wizard a la Moraine, just to like also spice up these like evoking the tropes, like this is your Moraine type from Wheel of Time.
But she has malicious intent or selfish intent or something like
that? She could. We could figure that out.
Like she could be
she could just be wrong though, like misinterpreting.
Yeah, that's also true. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm open to any of that. I just think it's more like number one, I'd love more gender diversity in this story, and I'd also love to play on the trope of people's expectations of like, I mean, I'm not done with Wheel of Time, so this isn't a spoiler. I don't know, like I'm hardly at the I'm 3 books in of a 14-book series. I don't know where it's all going, but my expectation is like a lot of people would read a Moraine type character and expect them to be right about who the chosen one is.
Right. And here's and I think I am leaning back more towards having them be like not maliciously intended, because another thing for me about these like subversions and grimdark kind of tendencies is that they're running on the basis that like humanity will always go towards evil or indifference. I think it's super interesting to look at, here's how being virtuistic or thinking you're being virtuistic is just as bad, if not worse, and giving everyone the intent of that they're doing the right thing and that they're determined to be on their path because it's their noble intention is more interesting than having someone being like, actually, I was evil the whole time and selfish. Isn't that subverting? It's like, that's been done. And I think we have a chance to do something different here by keeping everyone committed. I think the twist is they are noble.
And the reader buys into that
yeah,
while they're reading.
And
they're
the twist is that they were noble the whole time. They never
They were
weren't.
trying to be.
Yes, exactly.
They were. It's the difference between intentions and the actual impact that you're having on the world. Like from a more consequentialist perspective, what they're doing is their behaviors are bad. But there are like chosen one king and the like woman wizard they're both trying to do the right thing, but the impact they're having on the world is a negative one, and it's only our vengeful priest who is motivated to go against them by their like personal stakes, who's actually like
and maybe divine intervention.
It could be both. They've gotten to this point where they like were pouring through all these religious texts, and it was from a place of vengefulness.
Yeah.
But they actually stumbled upon like, oh wait, like the wizard and the king misinterpreted this thing. Like I'm very sure of it now. So it started vengeful, but it ended up them like they were right.
That the spring is coming. There's some horrible thing that's going to happen, which we normally associate horrible things with the winter, right? That's like that's like the thematic use of winter a lot of times, and the thematic use of spring is much more hopeful. But I can imagine like birds chirping and flowers blooming and people panicking, being like, no, we're too late. The sun is shining, we're doomed. Like that kind of thing.
That's interesting.
Because
so
subverting the thematic use of spring.
Okay. I'm trying to think how to play it then.
And then like
it's a
the
really
crops
interesting
can start
idea.
getting planted and like all these other great things. It's like so many things to like about spring. It's getting warmer, but it's the it also, because something about by the time spring has sprung, there's some horrible power thing going on that's threatening. And actually the priest, or maybe the king, or both, are like afraid, and when they see the signs of spring, they get panicked, like we're doomed.
Yes. So it's kind of this like we flip on its head this winter is coming idea, and we
spring
could
is
like,
coming.
Spring, exactly. Like with the kind of the thing that we were like the thing that the world wanted to stop from happening. That would be a better title
for this book. Spring is coming.
Spring is coming. Yeah. I think that. Well. Anyway, we don't have that choice.
We don't
Charles.
have that
the
luxury.
Generator has spoken, so it's not.
Spoken.
So I agree, but can't do anything about it.
Nope.
Then the other thing is this, like, the thing that people kept saying when the world was in danger was like, yeah, winter is here, but like spring is coming,
or like,
and like
he will bring
we have
the
to
spring
stop
or
that.
something like that, or like that kind of thing. And it's like,
yeah,
but bringing the spring is actually kind of bad for us right now. Like, who knows? Like,
so why is spring bad? That's the question.
That is the trick. And like, what is the spring of power? It could be like this power battle dynamic going on in spring. I
think it's what I was saying earlier, which is like there's a spring during which the person is in power. Like it's the time after their rise to power. It's the spring of actually being in power. It's like that's what the spring of power is.
Right.
The season of being in power.
So maybe it's, instead of like having spring come and being freaked out about it, maybe it's the fact that we are in spring is a sign of something bad. Because I think we want to start the book at the beginning of spring.
I like your idea here, Charles, and I think we can do something good with it. I have another idea, and let's see which one we end up wanting.
Let's hear it.
I think let's revisit that spring is actually good, and that it has come at the start of the book, and everyone thinks everything's all hunky-dory, because that kind of fits with where our book starts. It's like all the tropes have been true so far, everything's been great, and look, now spring came. Isn't that awesome?
Yeah.
And maybe, Charles, maybe it's not spring that's the problem. Maybe it is summer that is the problem. Winter's bad and summer's bad. Summer's just like ridiculously hot and it scorches everything, and so it's like, oh no, like summer is coming. So the thing that like everyone's like, oh, it's spring, fantastic, like everything's gone right, and the thing that they're worried about is going to go Like, well, most people
Summer
aren't
is
worried about the
coming.
priest. The priest is worried that summer is coming, and summer's worse even than winter was because of how hot and scorching and brutal things get. It's easier to make summer bad than spring because spring is such a like it's nice out, but
Yeah,
it's
and we want to start with
scorching.
spring, like you said. It just fits
Yes,
so well with what we're trying to do with framing the king as the chosen one and as the noble guy. And so
exactly.
I think we have to start at the beginning of spring, peak hopefulness, peak peace and prosperity, all that stuff. And it's this summer is coming theme that we can have fun with. And we
Right.
can start to understand what the power, like the spring of power is. The spring of power is the spring where this king and this priest and maybe this church behind the priest are competing for power to
Oh,
rule in the summer. Like that can essentially be
I,
the
the ideas are going now, Charles. I love what you're saying. Okay. So, what if this is a world that kind of like doubles and triples down on this? Seasons are preposterously long, a la A
Game
Song
of
of Ice
Thrones.
and Fire, Game of Thrones type thing,
Mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm.
You could have 100 years of winter or more, maybe even more. And maybe winter has gone on so long that, like, before this ever started, um, that like the idea of getting things from winter to spring hadn't been seen in generations and generations and generations. And it's almost like everyone forgot that there was even a season that came after spring. Like everyone forgot that summer was even something to be feared or that it exists in this world because there's been hundreds of years of winter and people just wanted that to change. And it's not that our chosen one wasn't the person to bring us from winter to spring. In fact, they were the perfect person to do that. They already did that. Unfortunately, Charles, and what our priest has figured out is that the chosen one's also the person, if they aren't stopped, that will bring us from spring to the awful, awful summer.
Hmm.
So that's why our priest has to stop the chosen one before it's too late and it becomes summer, which is so scorching. It's going to destroy the world or whatever. It's like something like that.
Yeah, there's a lot I like about that. I think if we're going to invite the comparison to Game of Thrones, then
Yeah.
we've got to really make a statement. And I like the direction that you're going in. That summer is coming, and it's horrible compared to the sweet summer child of
And
like
yeah.
you grew up all in a cushy, unburdened environment. So we can play off of that. I'm just trying to get the sense of how we're gonna get there. Um,
Well, it's like,
People have
okay,
to know that
here.
summer's coming after spring. That's the part that's
Well,
got me held up. Is
here's
that people have been in winter for so long that they don't know what spring or summer is.
Well, I think I like the idea of kind of the. I like the idea of the burden of responsibility being on the protagonist here for like whatever they did that got them from winter to spring was actually good, but too much of a good thing is going too far. And if they keep doing whatever they did to get from winter to spring, that's what's going to bring them to summer. I'm
Like
not married to the idea that so I think what's good about that, Charles, is it makes our protagonist they were right for a
right.
while,
Well, let's
and
go
now
back.
they're wrong if they
Yes,
keep doing the
yes,
same
I
thing.
agree. So let's go back and revisit the king's backstory as this like as tropey as humanly possible of a tropey
Yes,
fantasy story. He would have had to defeat an obviously evil person with some kind of power
Dark
to
Lord,
save the day, right?
evil, mustache twirling Dark
Obviously
Lord
this
is who they
evil dark
defeated.
lord must have been doing something that kept summer in check. So maybe it's not even
Yeah,
what if it's not even spring? What if they think it's spring but it's just this like horrible like heat storm or whatever that's transitioning them into spring and just
mm.
won't stop and will keep going into summer and keep going into like desert wasteland Mad Max style.
Uh, I liked where you're going. I guess what I am a little attached to, and I can be talked out of it for sure,
Because then that's
is this
the
idea of the protagonist having been right to defeat the evil lord while then being wrong in continuing to do whatever they were
well, I
doing,
think it's
I
more
guess.
important
You know
that
what I'm saying?
he thinks he's right. Like, and all the signs are there. Like, look, it's spring. But then this guy's like, this isn't spring. What are you talking about? This is like the unchecked power of this heat wave that's coming, you know? And but the king is like, no, it's spring. Like, look, all the flowers are blooming, the birds are
Okay.
chirping, we're planting the crops. And then it's a subversion of that comparison we invited of the Game of Thrones seasons, where it's like it wasn't even a season in the first place. I don't know. I think I'm not married to it either, but I just think that gives us an excuse to buy in why the king thinks he's right and committed to defending his
Well, the
position.
king. Yeah.
Because he needs
Well,
to, but the power's
I'm
wrong
gonna
and he
yes
doesn't know
and you
that.
here, Charles. I'm gonna yes and you because I can tell you're passionate about this. And let's roll with your thing. So the idea is this: like, we have there was no spring then. There was only like winter, and then after winter comes summer. Summer is a
No, there
terrible
is still spring, and maybe the priest is like, I can bring us to spring, but this is not spring. This is heat.
Okay.
You know, like we're still in winter, people, or not even necessarily that
Nah,
going that crazy. Like
ca-
that's too complicated. But
I like the idea of summer, man. That's like that summer is actually just a bad thing in this world because it flips this like Game of Thrones. Like winter
I
was
don't
the
like
bad
that.
thing
Like
to summer is the
seasons
bad
are
thing.
inevitable, so why does it even matter? You know, I like this idea that the intent is good, but the cause is like the cause is wrong, right? Like the king thinks I kill the Dark Lord, I get the power to bring in spring, and that happened. But then this priest is like, he didn't really bring in spring, and the power that he's using is making our world and our climate worse, and he's going to bring us into this Mad Max style wasteland if I don't stop him. But then the king's like, look around you, bro. Like the flowers are blooming, butterflies are flying around, birds are chirping. This is spring. And I defeated the Dark Lord to prove it. And then he's
Right.
like, you're wrong, and I like, this is not spring. And something like that could be interesting. I'm not married to that, but I think I don't like seasons being inevitable and the season just being doomsday. I like that there's some sort of power at play that
I
this
mean,
king is meddling in with this noble cause that he's actually using incorrectly. That's just where I'm coming from.
yeah. Well, I think it's definitely got legs that way.
It can
So
be
let's
spring. I don't mind that. I kind of like that. But what if it was we thought it was spring and it really wasn't? It was a warning sign
yeah.
of
I
something worse.
Yeah, no, I think that works too. So let's go with that, and we'll run with the idea that the, our king hero chosen one type has like thinks they defeated the Dark Lord before the story even starts, thinks that that will bring on spring, but in fact the Dark Lord that they'd already defeated at the start of our book was staving off this like awful heat wave, like summer, if we want to call it that, or not, and was not actually the thing stopping them from getting to
Yeah.
spring.
Right.
And spring actually would be a good thing to get to, and it's our priest antagonist who knows this stuff.
Right, right. And then that brings, like, the book is all about spring now, and there's like this contention of spring, and I don't know. I think it's got legs.
Yeah, yeah. So I feel like we have our beginning, and we have, this is where we end up a lot of times, right? Like we have our beginning and we have our ending, kind of, right? Like our beginning is, look at everything going so great for me, chosen one hero. You'll get some of my backstory told to you in dialogue and exposition dumps, probably, because this is all tropes, and I did everything right. I defeated the Dark Lord, and now spring is here. And then by the end of this, we have to reach a point where our, our wizard character and our king have come to like realize, it sounds like, is where we're going, that this initially vengeful priest, but eventually like correct and like logical priest knows that
that's funny,
is,
actually, because he could have bad intentions going
oh
in
yeah,
and then end up being the noble cause. So they're two sides of the same coin.
right,
The king and
yes,
the
it's
priest.
basically, yeah, it's flipped.
Right.
So we have
Nobility, wrong
well,
cause. and then you have vengefulness, but
vengefulness, right cause. By like both are kind of like stumbled on by accident, and it's kind of we can stick to what we were thinking earlier about this. Like the priest was started from this place of I'm pissed at this person. They killed my family member, or what have you. I'm pouring through all these religious texts. Oh crap! Like I'm actually right. This is not spring. This is something. This is going towards something terrible. So I don't know. Actually, maybe we don't have our ending yet, and our ending is this kind of like maybe the hero and the wizard character are able to come around in the. So it's kind of this like they start in this place of like being super noble in their heads.
Have like a nice hopeful, happy ending.
Hopeful ending, not grimdark. Where it's like, so they start, we're noble, we're trying to do the right things. We've always been trying to do the right things. And kind of what they have to learn is like, they were a little caught up in their own narrative to themselves about being like the wizard and the chosen one. And what they have to learn to do, Charles, is put aside the fact that no one likes this priest who's super vengeful. Put aside the fact that they thought they were the chosen one and the like wizard who fixed everything, and just say the real noble thing to do here when push comes to shove is listen to this priest because they're right, and there's something about listening to them will be the only way to actually get to spring.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. I'm actually quite interested in this story, and it comes to this ending where they do have this sort of understanding. I guess they both forgive each other, compromise a little bit, and are able to do what's needed to be done through the power of listening to each other and getting out of their own narratives to enact change in this world. I think that's a powerful, hopeful message. I like that.
I like it too, Charles. Yeah. And I think we should. Here's what I want.
And that gets back to spring, because spring is hopeful and all that. And then spring comes. The real spring.
After all the it's like the middle is subversive, but the end is kind of like, no, we'll bring it back. They did actually in the end save the world.
I think Grimdark is ready to come back around and get a little hopeful again.
Well, it's like what I won't bore people with too much of this, but it's like what we're talking about in the Monstrous Buddy Reed episodes, which is like. And I think Joe Abercrombie, who has the Lord Grimdark Twitter handle and all these labels of being like the most grimdark person ever, he's said too that he's like he doesn't love that term, and I see how his work has moved beyond labeling it that way in some of his later stuff too. So I think we are at this place you're talking about, Charles, where it's fine to write grimdark work. I've been one of the biggest proponents of grimdark work. I feel like so. And it's also cool to tell stories that are like flirting with these grimdark ideas, and then
we can give the priest like all the grimdark tropes. Even like give him every grimdark trope there is, and have them come together because he's the villain.
Ooh. What do you think of this, Charles?
Be like, I'm a priest, but I'm unsavory, and I don't care.
Yes. And because that means, Charles, the person who was right and the person who actually brings us to spring was the priest, with the help, of course, of the king and the wizard. So what if it turns out that means that the real chosen one was this, like, cantankerous, grumpy, like, kind of mean-spirited priest, but who is able to kind of put those things aside and pursue spring and
I like to think that there's
like that was a real.
I like to think that there's two chosen ones, the king and the priest, because I don't ever want the king to not be what he is, right? So I do want him to be chosen in the end. I think is important to his trope, and they're both chosen ones. I think would be kind of interesting.
Well,
you need both. You need two sides of the coin, essentially.
Okay, so he
Church
needs
and
to
state.
be able to. Sure, that's an I guess. Yeah. I kind of like this idea. Like, what is the lesson our protagonist has to learn? Our protagonist has to come to learn that, like, it's okay. Ooh, Charles, but then they're not the chosen one. They're the chosen two.
Yeah, the chosen two. That's
so
silly enough to work, I think. The Chosen
Yes.
Two.
So, but it's just true because the
Yes.
point of the Chosen One is that there's one of them. And I think that like that's one of our kind of subversions here is like this Chosen One trope is so well established. What about the Chosen Two? And
I like that.
what our protagonist has to learn is that like it's okay. The protagonist, like the reader at the start of this story, is so caught up in this narrative of them as this big shot chosen one hero who's just like the figure of this world, the protagonist, the main person. We can think of a few people
Yes.
that like fit that mold, right, Charles?
Yes.
In fantasy.
Yes.
And we are bought in at the start with the king of these ideas. And what we and the king both have to come to realize by the end of the story is that it's okay for this single chosen one character to share in their glory and be a part of a greater team that is working together. And kind of it's like a get over yourself narrative is what it's about.
Yes.
It's like the king needs to learn, get over yourself, get over this idea of being the chosen one.
Stop getting caught up in their own narrative, as you said.
Yes, exactly. And caught up in the narrative that we're used to in fantasy.
Yes.
Which is the chosen one narrative.
Yes.
So and then we and the king have to learn to accept that it's okay that there's not just a chosen one, that there are chosen two, and one of them's not going to look anything like what we expect.
I kind of like this idea. At the end, there's this dialogue between the king and the priest, right? The climactic end where it was like, I guess you're the king to the priest. You're a chosen one as well. And the priest is like, not chosen one, the chosen ... two ? You know, like this idea of like the king is so caught up in the narrative of a chosen one. He's like, oh, there's two chosen ones. And it's like, no, it's a chosen two. And then they kind of shrug. I'm like, I guess so.
It's a bit... Here's how I love all of that, and I just would change it to not being a question. I would go for it's like final line material. I think here, Charles, is like it's like I guess you're a chosen one as well. I don't say two, like TOO, but it's like I guess you're a chosen one as well. Said the king.
Like another chosen one or something like that?
Something like that. Mm-hmm. That's the setup's less important than the like finish, which I wouldn't have be a question. I would have like the last line being like, well, I guess it was the chosen two. Or something like that, right? Like just find like that's it. And that's like we leave you with that, dear reader, that it was a chosen two. Something like that, because it's like I feel like shrugging at the end. It's like don't take the weight off.
Not
it.
the
Let
end.
It hit.
I think they're like realizing that that's kind of a silly idea, but it's true. Or it's like it's not two chosen ones; it's a chosen two. But if you want to make it I feel like it's almost too cheeseball to make it the very last line. You'd have to really work on making that not cheeseball. And I just think you can't say the chosen two without acknowledging that that's kind of like funny, you know?
Okay. But I see where you're coming from.
You can have it pay off, but it's going to be difficult. But I think, someone out there has the writing chops to do it.
Yes. So, I see. I hear where you're coming from, Charles. But we won't figure that out probably because we don't really intend on writing this. But if someone does, then they'll figure out where to end. I see where you're coming from. Where ending on that could be a little too cheesy. Yeah. So, okay, so
that's why I added it as kind of like I guess we're the chosen two. That would be actually endearing, funny.
Yeah, I like it. You're
not
right.
Cheeseball. That's the only reason why I just initially thought make it a question, but it could also be a joke. It could also be like a true thing, and that's something like a grimdark kind of person would deliver, like, and the tropey king would set up. There's like that setup payoff thing where it's like, oh, there's two, like you're a chosen one as well. It's like, yeah, I guess we're the chosen two, and then that kind of opens the king's mind to be like, oh, maybe why would there just be one person chosen to do all this work? Like that kind of gets his wheels. Finally gets him out of that narrative a little, or starts to get him out of that narrative,
Right.
So
it could even be a part. Yeah, I think that's very astute, Charles. Is like using that more as this like break. It's like rising, or maybe not rising action, like, oh no, it's earlier in the story
Yeah.
than the conclusion, because it's like this moment where finally the priest is able to break through the
Yes.
like king's thick
Yeah.
skull to be
Yeah.
like, get over yourself, like it's not just one, like people work together to accomplish
And
goals.
maybe the king
And
at the end can be like the chosen many or something. Yeah.
yes, yeah, it's like speaking to the king's people. Like the king ends still the king, and is kind of like, or even just the whole group, like including the wizard,
Why stop at
including
two,
everyone
Dylan? We
else.
could have chosen many.
Chosen many,
Yeah.
yes, but we do get this moment kind of in the middle, or like the 3/4 of the way through of this kind of like chosen two moment,
And you
and
know
eventually
what?
we
The
reach
next
the chosen
trilogy
many.
we write would be called The Chosen Many, and it would be just a team of people doing
It
fun
would be
fantasy stuff. Yeah,
it'd be the opposite of the wisdom of crowds, would I imagine. Joe Abercrombie's final book in this series, the wisdom in his Age of Madness trilogy, is called The Wisdom of Crowds. I imagine he'll be a little more critical.
Well, we're
than we
subverting
will.
that by saying
Yes.
The Chosen Many.
Like that they are wise. Yeah. So I don't know. I guess I'm trying to figure out. I'm trying to figure out if we're there. Like, do we have a beginning, middle, and end right now that we feel comfortable as kind of a loose
I think
outline?
we've got enough of a treatment here that we can bring this home in some sort of outline.
Okay, let's give it a try, and if there's stuff still left, we'll flesh it out. But let's try our little bounce back and forth summary of it.
Sure. So
yeah.
we've got The Spring of Power, starring our chosen one king and our vengeful priest. The story opens with the king hot off of his victory against the Dark Lord. He's proudly wielding all of his power. Spring has come, crops are growing.
Or it seems.
So it would seem,
yes.
because we have this grim, dark, vengeful priest who, while practicing religion, is also on this vengeful hunt to like depose the king in some way, and he's searching because
the vengeful priest was a family member to one of these evil Dark Lord henchmen or hench people that was killed by our chosen one protagonist on their rise to power from the chosen one protagonist, who came from these humble farm boy beginnings, had to crack a few eggs to make the omelet that was them becoming the king and bringing them to what the king thought was spring. And one of these eggs that got cracked has a family, and part of that family is this priest, and the priest is just absolutely pissed at the chosen one. And it starts from this place of vengefulness of like, they can't be the chosen one if they did this awful thing. So the priest is looking through all of these religious texts. They have good access to that, and they stumble upon something that gives them even this supernatural, like, divine intervention realization that spring has not really come. In fact, something horrible might be heading their way.
Yes,
Charles.
because the power that the king righteously wielded to defeat the Dark One is the same power that's bringing warmth to the land. And it may seem like spring has sprung to everyone looking for answers to this prophecy. They wouldn't question it. But it is actually bringing on a much greater warning that, hey, this will all be desert wasteland if we don't do anything about controlling this power. And that's what brings on this contention between the king and the priest. Because the king, in doing what he thought was right, he's gotten caught up in
alongside wizard mentor,
alongside a noble, old, ancient, angelic being that is the wizard mentor.
Yes, like Moraine meets Gandalf.
Exactly. It's what you wound up doing the right thing, but it caused you to doom us all, essentially. It's like you did the right thing and we're all doomed. It's essentially like where we're coming from with this piece.
I love that.
And what we get is this contention between the king and the priest, and it ultimately winds up with this huge realization / breakthrough between the two of them.
Yes, and that realization and breakthrough is that there's not just a chosen one. There is going to need to be multiple people working toward the goal of spring, if that is ever going to actually happen and they're going to avoid this cataclysmic heat wave type thing that is heading their way. And the priest, we get these moments where the priest and the king are conflicting. Maybe we even get like some fights or battles, who knows, like all sorts of stuff can happen in the middle. But eventually, yes, we get the priest to have this moment where they break through to the king by saying like, maybe you're not the chosen one, maybe like we get the king saying like, yeah, you like go ahead, Chelsea.
Yeah, so the king is like, oh, are you a chosen one as well? And then the priest says, well, maybe we're the chosen two. And then that's kind of funny. And then it's not towards the end that we get the chosen many.
We eventually get
there. We work our way there.
So we'll work our way there. We get the moment of like our king's head is kind of spinning after that like chosen two comment, because the king has been so caught up on this narrative of himself as this awesome chosen one straight out of the stories that we as readers are very used to reading, that like finally this moment there, it's like shattered our king's worldview, and eventually it brings our king around to the point where he's willing to, the king and the wizard are both like, they're both well-meaning is key to this too. And in this way of being well-meaning noble people, they start to realize like, hey, maybe we were wrong about some of this. Maybe we need to get over ourselves, and maybe we need to join forces with this grimdark style, like unlikable, vengeful priest character who actually like knows what's going on in the religion which is real in this world. And has the right answers of how we're going to get past this awful impending heat wave thing and actually get to spring. So they come together,
and then we end as the chosen many embracing the true spring.
Right. And something about the priest and I would think the priest and the king and the wizard all coming together allows them to have the amount of people behind their pursuits that they are able to like overcome this event as the chosen many.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Well, so I think that's how it ends.
That's how it ends. And what do you think, Dylan, of having like a prologue where the king defeats the Dark Lord and then it goes into chapter 1, which is the spring, right? Because then you get to start with something really like action-packed, dramatic, full-on fantasy tropes. You have the wizard shooting spells, the king's like slinging his swords, and in the final moments he wields the power and it kills the Dark Lord, but wielding the power actually kicked off the whole story, right? Because it started, quote, spring. Huh?
Right. And what if during that prologue, just like a mini part of it before they get to the Dark Lord is them killing the hench person who was the priest's family member.
Yeah, sure.
So it's like dismissed. It's like you don't even think about it. It's like there's a guard at the door and the guard gets wrecked because the chosen one doesn't even think twice about wrecking a guard on their way to trying to kill the Dark Lord. But that guard has a freaking family, and this sets off the whole story, is both killing the Dark Lord but also giving the priest a reason to be vengeful. And but it's like a tiny part of the prologue you wouldn't even notice. What you're paying attention to in the prologue is the fact that they're fighting the
people
Dark
will
Lord.
go back and read that prologue and be like, oh, it all happened here. We just weren't paying attention because we're so caught up in the tropes and the action
and the narrative.
Because exactly,
much like the king.
And we could make it potentially either a trilogy or a book in 3 parts, and I want to call it The Spring of Powers Part 1, The Chosen 2 is Part 2, and The Chosen Many is Part 3.
Yes. I would like to tell it I like the parts idea.
Yeah,
like I'd like to tell it as a standalone novel with 3 parts, and those are the titles of the parts.
This sounds like fun, honestly. This
might be my favorite one that we've come up with.
And
so
honestly,
far,
at the start, I was like, this is going to be our worst one. Because
I thought that too.
I don't know how to do a chosen king and a vengeful priest in a book called The Spring of Power. I just don't know how to do it. But somehow, with your collaborative efforts, we were able to get through it and create a wonderful story. We did.
Well, Charles, it takes a chosen two. To you and me to be able to do this together.
And
it's not just a chosen one. It takes two lifelong friends.
And I would say there's also the chosen many of all you listeners out there. For without you, this series and this show would not exist. So thank you all for sticking through this with us. We hope you enjoyed us creating the Spring of Power. And we hope you tune in next time as we talk about some other fantasy-related topic.
I don't even know what to say after that. That was amazing. Like, that you were like the chosen many, and you point to the listeners.
Thank you.
This is like when Daenerys is like, I choose you all.
Yeah.
It's like, and everyone's cheering.
Misa.
Yeah. So, yeah. No, awesome. You are the chosen many, our listeners. We're so thankful, I think we have improvised a fantasy story today, and we're ready for that sweet, sweet outro music.
I'm ready for that sweet, sweet outro music as well. So let's get it going. Thank you, everyone, for listening to yet another very exciting episode of the Friends Talking Fantasy Podcast. This has been your co-hosts and author outliner people, Charles and Dylan.
Definitely not author.
Not author. I qualified it with author of an outline. So
sure.
If you like what you heard today, if you want to see, I'm going to go ahead and make a book cover for this lovely book, and Dylan's going to go out there and post it on social media at Twitter on the FTF Podcast with a number 1 at the end, and on Facebook and Instagram as well at the FTF Podcast. If you ever want to write in, you can do so at the FTF Podcast at gmail.com. And Dylan, if they wanted to support the show even further and they happen to be listening on Apple Podcasts, what can they do?
Toss 5 stars to our podcast. Just click that Friends Talking Fantasy page on the Apple Podcast app. Then scroll down past all of those episodes that you're seeing until you start seeing stars. Once you're seeing stars, the best number of those to click if you want to support the show would be 5 of them. If you have a little bit of extra time and want to go the next step, you can even write a review, and that's super helpful for our podcast and for people finding it and listening, all that kind of stuff. But just listening, the chosen many.
Listening.
It's more than enough. Thank you so much.
You guys are the chosen many. Thank you so much for listening. And as always, go forth and conquer, friends.